no. Okay, so do you need
Yep,
host? You said, are you good?
it's preparing right now.
Okay,
Everything's
perfect.
going now.
Okay, we're going to start recording. So everyone who is here, does anyone have any issue or do not want to be recorded? If so, just let me know and I'll make sure we will remove your face and your name from the recording. Okay. All right. Okay, great. Hello, everybody. The time is 12:20 p.m. Eastern Time, and my name is Zaire Ali. I am the political director at the Urban Political Pipeline and Advocacy Network Foundation, and I am here today with two of our wonderful team members as we are hosting our health education and economic forum. So I'm going to let our team who will be hosting the event introduce themselves briefly, and then we will turn it over to the people that everyone's here to see and hear from.
Hi, my name is Ria. I'm the research project coordinator at the Urban Health Collaborative.
Hello, my name is Tamir Mears Gaines. I am the communication director of the Urban Health Collaborative, and it is nice to meet you all, and I'm glad that I'm here.
Great. Thank you, Tamir and Ria. So without any further ado, I'm going to let Miss Dr. Patricia Campos Medina introduce herself.
Hello, oh, okay, yeah, okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Patricia Campos Medina, and I am running for the United States Senate because at this moment in time, where workers are demanding a right to have a union, when women's rights are under attack, when families are going into bankruptcy because of high medical costs, it is time to send a woman to the United States Senate to fight for our opportunity for all New Jersey families. Um, I am a labor champion with 30 years of experience advocating for the rights of American workers to have a union so we can build the middle class. I have a record of fighting for affordable health care, both through union contracts and through support of the Affordable Health Card and through my support of Medicare for All. I have worked to make sure that women have the rights to work free of sexual harassment and for LGBTQ plus community right to live free of gender violence. I am ready to go to Washington, D.C. To fight for a fair tax code so we can have the resources to invest in affordable housing, in affordable childcare, in affordable healthcare, in a transportation system. As the only woman on this race, I will fight for reproductive freedoms and for reproductive healthcare justice by going to Washington, D.C. and eliminating the filibuster, expanding the Supreme Court, and imposing a strong ethics code so that Supreme Court judges are not wine and dined by a billionaires to take our freedoms away. I have a record that shows that this Jersey girl is ready to stand up to the billionaire class. We do not need more men like Jeff Bezos exploiting workers right here in the warehouses in New Jersey while they build rockets to go to the space for a hobby. This Jersey girl is the epitome of the American dream, and I am committed to make sure that every child of workers here in New Jersey, every child of a middle class family who's struggling to pay for their children's education, that we invest in higher education in a public school system so they can also build their American dream. This Jersey girl will be Donald Trump's worst nightmare because I am proof that as an immigrant woman, as immigrants, we get the job done and we're here to contribute to America and to build our neighborhoods and to work along with other community members to fight for working people. So I am ready to do that as I go to the United States Senate. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about these important issues today.
Thank you, Dr. Campos Medina. Next, we're going to have Brother Larry Ham introduce himself.
Good afternoon. My name is Larry Ham. On the ballot, though, I am Lawrence Ham. and I am the chairman of the People's Organization for Progress, a 42-year-old grassroots organization that works for racial, social, economic justice, and peace. And I am a candidate for United States Senate. I was raised in Newark, New Jersey. I'm a product of Newark Public Schools. At the age of 17, I began my sojourn as a social justice activist. I led my first organized protest in the spring, in my senior year, in the spring of my senior year at Arts High School, a protest for better education. That protest, that walkout, march, and sit-in that I led at the age of 17 led me to be appointed to the Newark Board of Education at the age of 17, making me the youngest school board member ever appointed in the history of the United States. And I still think I hold that record. I was not even old enough to vote. I served 3 years on the school board and then returned to Princeton University in 1974 as a freshman. While at Princeton, I was one of the founders of the People's Front for the Liberation of Southern Africa, whose stated goal was to get Princeton University to divest itself from companies doing business with the racist apartheid regime in South Africa. For 4 years, I helped to organize protests and educational programs. And then in my senior year, I led 66 days of consecutive protest at Nassau Hall, which culminated in 210 of us, 210 Princeton students, taking over Nassau Hall. As a result, Princeton divested from several corporations doing business in South Africa. I returned to Newark, New Jersey after 2 years of graduate work at Princeton. I graduated cum laude, undergraduate, and then did 2 years of graduate work at Princeton, returned to Newark. The first thing I organized was a fuel oil cooperative called the People's Energy Cooperative. I organized 400 families to collectively purchase their fuel oil, and by doing so, get lower prices for the home heating oil and for the service contracts. And then the following year, 1982, I founded the People's Organization for Progress. During that time, POP has organized and mobilized around almost every issue that affects urban areas. In the 1980s, I supported Jesse Jackson's campaign, his 1984 presidential campaign, and I was the state co-chairman of Jesse Jackson's campaign in 1988, and I was a delegate to the Democratic National Convention in Atlanta, Georgia. I was a delegate for Jesse Jackson. More recently, in 2016, I supported Bernie Sanders' campaign for president, and I was a Sanders delegate to the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia in 2016. And then in 2020, I was the state chairman of Bernie Sanders' state campaign, his presidential campaign in the state of New Jersey. And I also ran for the United States Senate in 2020. And now I'm a U.S. Senate candidate in 2024. I'm running for United States Senate because I want to fulfill those goals that Dr. Martin Luther King put forward during the civil rights movement. I want to end poverty. I want to end unemployment. I want to achieve affordable housing and establish housing as a human right. I want to see free education throughout the United States, from kindergarten all the way through graduate school, medical school, and law school. I want to see the abolition of student debt. I want to establish a living wage for all working people in this country. And I want to see an end to war. And I will do everything I can to put the United States on a different course with regard to international affairs so that we don't end up spending our domestic treasure on foreign wars, but spend it at home on the needs of the people, housing, healthcare, education, and all the other needs of the people. So that's why I'm running for United States Senate.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you. And thank you for sharing some of your stories and just really some of your life experience with us and the viewers. So without any further ado, let's get rolling. And just as a reminder, we're going to give each candidate a 60-second reminder and a 30-second reminder. And each we're this forum is split into three different major topics: so health questions, economic questions, and education questions. And you may hear the questions coming out of order, but that's fine. So since we started with Dr. Campbell Medina on introductions, we're going to start with Mr. Larry Ham right now with our first question. So if you were elected senator for New Jersey, how do you plan to address the ongoing challenges of healthcare access and affordability, particularly in those marginalized communities?
When I am elected United States Senate, I will introduce in the Senate a Medicare for All universal health care bill. I believe that healthcare should not be a profit center for insurance companies and corporations, that healthcare is a human right, and that people should not have to worry about going to see a doctor or a dentist and having bills to pay. We are the only industrialized country that does not have universal health care. And if we could achieve that in our lifetimes, it would be a significant step forward in social development in the United States. So that's thing one. Thing two is this. In the United States, in the state of New Jersey, in the last 25 years, we have closed
1 minute on the clock.
more than 40 hospitals in the state of New Jersey. I will introduce a National Healthcare Infrastructure Protection and Development Act to establish a federal fund to assist hospitals that are in financial distress in order to prevent them from closing. Hospitals like East Orange General, which is on the verge of being closed now. So those are
30 seconds left.
So those are two things that I would do with regard to healthcare.
Thank you. Same question for you, Dr. Patricia. As a senator, how do you, if you're elected as a senator, how would you plan to address the ongoing challenges of healthcare access and affordability, particularly from marginalized communities?
I have spent 30 years advocating for the rights of workers to have a union, because the number one benefit that unionization has for workers is the ability to negotiate not just better wages, but also access to affordable healthcare. So first, when I talk about affordability of healthcare, it begins with what kind of economy we're creating. So I will continue to advocate for the right of workers to join union, and to push for the PRO Act to be enacted in the United States Senate. With that said, I'm also a labor leader who has also advocated for Medicare for All for a long time as a solution to being able to decouple the employment relationship from the healthcare access relationship. We have a private healthcare system in this country that is controlled by the interests of insurance companies, and
1 minute on the clock.
And it limits access that way. But in addition, in order to move to a universal healthcare, which is what we ought to have, we also need to figured out how to decouple healthcare from the employment relationship. And one solution is Medicare for all. So I'm a big supporter of Bernie Sanders' legislation to move to a Medicare for all system, because Medicare is the only one of the programs that has been successful for the
30
last
seconds
60
left.
years. We also need to make sure that in order to we also need to make sure that in order to fund better access to Medicaid and improve Obamacare, that we could and we continue to fight corporate America and make sure that they pay their share of corporate taxes. And we need to install a wealth tax so that we can actually afford to protect Medicaid for poor working communities, expand Medicare for all to the 10 million workers who are working but do not have access to health care, and for everybody else who needs to be able to have affordable accessibility to healthcare.
All right, that's time.
Thank you. Mr. Ham. Next question. How will you advocate for increased funding for public education, including K-12 schools, to ensure that they have the adequate resources to address disparities, to support teachers and student well-being?
Hello? You went
Hello.
in and out. You went in and out. Could you repeat the question? Because it broke up.
Sure can. If elected as U.S. Senator, how will you advocate for increased funding for public education within K-12 schools to address the disparities that they see with resources and funding?
One of the roles of a United States Senator is to review and approve the federal budget. When elected United States Senator, and as the Senator for New Jersey, I will demand more funding for public education in the United States. Right now, when you look at the federal budget of the United States, we spend about 87% on police and defense, with the majority of that going toward national defense. Do you know how much of the federal budget goes to education? About 1%. If we are to have a highly educated population and one of the best technically trained populations in the 21st century, we must have the best public schools. So as a United States Senator, I will demand, when budget time comes, for significant increases in federal funding for public schools and colleges in the United States.
Thank you. Dr. Campos Medina, same question for you. If elected U.S. Senator, how will you advocate for increased funding for public education within K-12 schools to help address the resource and funding disparities in these communities?
The federal government has a role to play in making sure that we're properly funding public school systems to meet the demands of No Child Left Behind. So we need to do more to make sure that New Jersey gets the resources that it needs and to be able to continue to be one of the best school systems in the country. New Jersey only gets about about 79 cents for every dollar that we pay into taxes to the federal government. And part of my job as a United States Senator will be to make sure that we get most of that money back through investment in higher education and in K-12 education. Additionally, we need to make sure that we are working hand in hand with New Jersey, with the state of New Jersey, to making sure that we are actually funding the school formula correctly, and that we're actually acting in a manner to desegregate some of our school districts.
1 minute left.
I've been an advocate for the desegregation of the school system, because a lot of our urban schools districts are very segregated, and that means that they're lacking the resources to actually achieve kids' best potential. So we need the Department of Education at the federal level has a role to play in making sure that New Jersey desegregates our public school systems. Ultimately, as in previous, we need to make sure that corporate America is paying
30 seconds.
By fighting for the corporate tax to be returned and a wealth tax to be imposed. Remember, we need also to get a SALT deduction back so that family who own homes are able to get relief and that we're able to continue the local taxes that pay for a local public school system.
Thank you. Thank you both very much. That was very insightful, and it's a nice segue into our next question. What policies do you support to promote job creation and economic growth, particularly in industries that have been disproportionately affected by our recent economic challenges? And again, for you, Mr. Ham, what policies do you support to promote job creation and economic growth, particularly in industries that have been disproportionately affected by recent economic challenges?
Well, let me say this. One of the things that I will do as United States Senator from New Jersey will be to introduce legislation for a national federally funded jobs program to provide jobs at a living wage. In the 1930s, we had a New Deal, and part of the New Deal was a jobs program known as the WPA, Works Progress Administration. There was also the CCC. If anyone has ridden the Newark subway was a WPA project. We have many federal projects that can be used to create jobs, including housing construction and environmental protection. And through those, we can create literally hundreds of thousands of jobs, also transportation. We can create hundreds of thousands of jobs with federal jobs at a living wage. In this way, we can possibly eliminate unemployment in the United States and also promote economic development.
Thank you, Mr. Ham. For you, Dr. Campos Medina, what policies do you support to promote job creation, economic growth, particularly in industries that have been disproportionately affected by recent economic challenges?
One of the, as a labor leader and as a labor advocate, I have a record of fighting for investments in good jobs, which includes the collective bargaining agreements, living wages, project labor agreements, investment in training programs so that the students and communities, members of women and Black and Brown and immigrant community have access to good career jobs in the trades. One of the biggest job creation programs since the Great Depression was the recent Inflation Reduction Act and the Build Back Better program that bill that President Biden acted coming right out of the pandemic. I think we need to go back, and as a senator, I will go back and continue to fund those two bills because they are geared towards investing in an infrastructure.
1 minute.
Creator, and also on a green energy creation, which are job creation, which are creating jobs. The Inflation Reduction Act has a segment in which is huge investments on green energy, electrical, and creating an electrical grid, and we need to continue to invest in that. The recent policy of President Biden to impose the tariffs on China so that they reduce the
30 seconds.
Factoring of the supply lane for the green energy production of solar energy. I think that's a key policy that we must keep, because if we do not invest in a manufacturing industry in the United States, we will not be able to revive some of our blighted urban areas and the Midwest of our country. So I am a big supporter of strategically imposing tariffs on China and renegotiating a trade agreement.
That's time.
So that really incentivize manufacturing job creation back in the United States.
Thank you. Thank you so much, both of you. So now as we're moving on, we're going to have our Ria ask the next few questions. So we're going to start with you, Dr. Campos Medina. So Ria, take it away.
So here's the next question. How will you work to ensure that LGBTQ plus individuals have access to inclusive and culturally competent healthcare services without facing discrimination?
We need to actually expand our anti-discrimination laws to protect our LGBTQ plus and transsexual community members. They ought to have all the rights that every citizen in this country has and have access to healthcare, and prohibit discrimination against in all walks of life, not just in healthcare, but in housing and in treatment. At the Worker Institute, of where I am the executive director, we have done a lot of work to create what we call equity at work, in which all protections that are geared towards protecting women and disadvantaged communities, our black communities, black workers, and our ethnic workers also are extended to our LGBTQ plus community. We have done a lot of work to address gender violence in the workplace as an issue of discrimination, so that the employers are forced to proactively enact policies that protect
1 minute.
To have the same rights at the workplace. So we ought to do the same at the federal level to make sure that our LGBTQ plus and transgender members of our community have equal access in their communities and equal protections against gender violence wherever they live.
Thank you. That was very insightful. And Mr. Ham, same question. How will you work to ensure that LGBTQ plus individuals have access to inclusive and culturally competent healthcare services without facing discrimination?
Well, first and foremost, I will use the office of U.S. Senate as a bully pulpit to advocate on behalf of our LGBTQ community and trans communities. I think there are a lot of elected officials that are scared to touch the issue, quite frankly. But if we are to move forward as a nation, we cannot condone any form of racial discrimination, of sexism, homophobia, Islamophobia, transphobia, or any kind of bias. One of the things I think that we need at this time is a new Civil Rights Act to cover this. Why do I say that? Because obviously the existing civil rights laws are not strong enough. And the Supreme Court has overturned
1 minute.
our existing civil rights laws. And one of them was very recently with regard to our LGBTQ community. So we need a new Civil Rights Act to strengthen the Civil Rights Act so that there's a legal foundation so that we can pass other laws that will make it nearly impossible
30 seconds.
for any form of discrimination against someone based on sex or sexual orientation or race, ethnicity, or nationality.
Thank you. And this next question is for Dr. Campos Medina. What is your stance on income support programs such as universal basic income or guaranteed minimum income? And how do you plan to address concerns about poverty and economic insecurity?
As an advocate for labor rights, an advocate for economic justice, I fundamentally believe that the best anti-poverty uh, program is good job with a living wage, with respect and dignity on the job, and with a union. And the fact is that we don't have that in the United States. The majority of workers do not have unions. We still have a federal minimum wage that is $7.25. New Jersey, we have a five minimum wage of $15 an hour. It took us 10 years to get to 15. Our minimum wage should be 25 or higher at this point. So if we really want to address poverty, we actually have to start creating and demanding that corporate America respects unions so that we can build the middle class and pays a living wage with access to healthcare. So in the meantime, though, we need to invest in the child tax credit, in the poverty, in the earned income tax credit, so that we can put money back in people's family. I am a supporter of there's being experiments that if you provide families basic income, that they're able to perform better in their economic social mobility bracket. So I'm supportive of those experiments. The problem is how we're gonna pay for them.
30 seconds.
And is that we actually have to go back to establishing the corporate tax and establishing a wealth tax, because we cannot continue to have trillionaires with the top 1% of this country owning 60% of the wealth of this country or higher. And we start taxing and demanding corporate American trillionaires pay their fair share, it would be impossible to afford to have basic income for people. But I am supportive of the experimentation.
That's time.
Figuring out how do we create that system. But ultimately, I will always fight for a good job, because I believe what workers need is a job with dignity and a good wage.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Mr. Ham, same question. What is your stance on income support programs such as universal basic income or guaranteed minimum income? And how do you plan to address concerns about poverty and economic insecurity?
Am I on? I
Yeah.
support such programs. The idea of a universal basic income or guaranteed minimum income is not new. This was advocated by Dr. Martin Luther King, and you can find this in his book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, in the appendix on economic and social justice reforms. I not only support the experimental programs, I will introduce legislation to create a guaranteed basic universal income in the United States of America. I believe that it is imperative that we eliminate poverty in the United States. We are the richest country in the world. We have the means to do so, and we should do so. This was one of Dr. King's great goals. How can we have streets and schools and statues named after Dr. King, but we're not implementing
1 minute.
his economic justice program? So I will introduce legislation for a universal guaranteed basic income in the United States, an economic floor below which no American can fall.
Thank you so much. We are going to have our next questions get started. So Tamir, please, I guess please come out, and here we go.
Yep. So to start things off, Mr. Ham, I have a question. What measures will you take to address housing affordability, homelessness, and particularly in high-cost urban areas and communities experiencing housing shortage?
Well, this ties into my position on the elimination of poverty in the United States. Do you know that economists say that it would cost about $30 billion to eliminate homelessness in the United States of America? That's about as much as the bill that was passed last week to provide more military aid to Israel for its genocidal war in Gaza. I will introduce legislation to make that appropriation for programs to eliminate homelessness so that we can eliminate homelessness in the richest country in the world in the 21st century. We can not only do that in our lifetimes, we can do it within the next decade if we have the political will to do it. And in addition to that, I will also, as I said earlier, introduce legislation for an officially observed federal living wage. We have a minimum wage now, which should be increased immediately. Right now, the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. It should be immediately, not phased in, immediately increased to $17 an hour. But we shouldn't stop there. We should not just have a minimum wage in the US. We should have a living wage. And right now, in New Jersey, an official living wage would be about $35 an hour.
Wow, that was very insightful. So this Miss Medina.
Yes, I go back to the issue of affordability of housing has to do that. How are we creating an economy that works for everyone? How are we creating communities where everyone can work and live? How are we investing in job creation that creates a living wage and a career for people? How are we investing in education? So they're all connected. But the issue of housing in New Jersey, as you know, New Jersey is one of the most populated states in the country. So there's no the housing that we need to build up rather than out, because we don't have any more land in which we can build. So this is where the federal government does have a role to play through HUD, through incentivize the investment in mixed income housing in our cities and in our urban centers. We did not do this correctly in Jersey City. That's why we're seeing the crisis of high luxury housing in the waterfront in the front, and then everybody else is being pushed out. And this is happening in cities across New Jersey. So what we need to do is incentivize through grants and low income and loans, partnerships between municipalities and developers and the state to actually create mixed income housing where people can live and work where they can work where they live. We also need to incentivize the creation access to mortgages that are affordable. We need to eliminate predatory lending for Black and Brown families. Black and Brown families hold the highest rate to predatory mortgages, and that's making it very difficult for Black families to actually achieve wealth in New Jersey. And so part of how we need to incentivize acquiring wealth, that we have to actually incentivize first-time homeowners, young people, to be able to afford their first home so they can start building wealth. And we also need to protect evictions. There's the high levels of evictions happening from our elder members of our community, both Latinos and Blacks, who are losing their home because they're being evicted because they have predatory mortgages that they're not able to pay, and they're losing their homes. So a lot of protection for in that level, and the federal government, as your senator, I will have a role to play in making sure that those type of policies are enforced so that we can protect people who have homes to be able to keep them, but create more housing that is affordable across our cities. We also need to protect rent control. Even our young families who are
1 minute.
professional, have are raising families in our inner cities, are being priced out of their homes. So we also need to do rent control, and that is a policy that can be incentivized through the federal government and the state, so that we can actually make communities more affordable along the way. Thank you.
All right. So the next question. So, Mr. Ham, what strategies do you support to address gun violence and promote public safeties in New Jersey? including measures to strengthen background checks and prevent illegal firearms trafficking.
Yes. This is a very serious problem in our community, and it has been so for a long time. I believe that the current crisis in gun control, uh, one of its several roots is the cutback that was made by the Reagan administration in funds for the interdiction of illegal weapons and drugs across state borders. As United States Senator, I will introduce legislation to increase funding for federal law enforcement agencies and other agencies for gun trafficking and drug trafficking along our state borders and, of course, along our coastlines. This is a serious problem. The other thing that I would do is introduce legislation to reinstitute the ban on assault-style weapons, which we did have in this country as late as, I believe, 1996. There was a ban that was passed earlier, and then it was permitted to sunset by a Republican-controlled Congress. In other words, there was not a majority in the Congress to renew the ban. Immediately, we began to see an increase in mass shootings in the United States. And right now, the United States has the highest number of mass civilian killings on the face of the earth. We have almost 2 a day in the United States. So, and then the last thing I would, well, not the last thing, but one of the other important things I would do is to make federal gun manufacturers liable for the damage that their products do to our communities. There are no gun manufacturing companies in Newark, in Patterson, in Atlantic City, in Trenton, in Camden. Recently, there was a decision with regard to opioid addiction in this country, and the owners of the pharmacies that were producing the opiates were made liable. It was families that own these companies, and they now have to pay back some billions of dollars to urban communities and other communities affected by the opioid crisis. The same thing should be done to the gun manufacturers. Their products are taking lives and doing untold damage to people and to property in our communities. And it's time that we lift the protections that we have, that they have, the protections that they have, basically the immunity they have, and hold them accountable.
1 minute.
I'm done.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Wow, thank you.
So, Dr. Campos Medina, what strategy do you support to address gun violence and promote public safeties in New Jersey, including measures to strengthen background checks and prevent illegal firearm trafficking?
As a mother of 2 teenagers, my biggest worry is that now, instead of having fire drills, our students are having shooter drills at school. And to me, having grown up in a war zone where we had to do the same thing, the level of anxiety that produces, to the fact that that's the reality that we have in our public schools, is frightening to me. So I think we need to, New Jersey does have one of the strongest gun control laws, but if our neighbors around us don't, they can come in and bring illegal weapons into our state. I support the ban on assault rifles and assault weapons, because I don't believe that weapons of war belong in the arms of civilians. So I will fight and go to Washington, D.C. and fight to reinstate the assault weapons ban, and also work hand in hand with the state and legislators to strengthen our illegal gun um, uh, laws here in New Jersey. We also need to do more to do background checks on those gun owners who want to have it. We need to be able to do a lot of more mental health checks and make sure that we monitor better who is getting access to those guns. We also need to hold the retailers company that sell guns in retail shops like Walmart more accountable for actually doing background checks before they just give sell guns out as in the retail shops. And we need to strengthen all of those measures. We also need to work hand in hand with our police to make sure that we have violence prevention programs, that they act more like a community police and that engage with the community and track hotspots of where illegal gun possession is known to be happening, and proactively work with law enforcement to
1 minute left.
and engage in more of a community building approach so that we can keep our community safe and keep guns out of criminals' hands in our cities and urban areas. So it's a multi-layer approach, but fundamentally, as United States Senator, we need to strengthen our gun laws federally, beginning with reinstating the assault weapons ban. Thank you.
Thank you both for your wonderful and realistic answers. As a public health researcher who focuses on urban communities, I definitely resonate. I definitely say that we do need to hold these gun manufacturers. We do need to hold these places who allow guns to get into our cities, just like, back in the day, what they were doing in Chicago, literally training, railing in guns, to these places where, like, how do you get M16 or assault rifle in New Jersey, in Plainfield, in North, like, that doesn't make sense. So yeah, people do need to be held accountable, and it needs to start yesterday. So as we move on, I just want to let everyone know we are running on good time. So thank you all, and thank you for our audience here from around the world. So the next question, we are going to, I guess, get into a little, a little fun things. So this is my things that I like, and this is really what this forum has been and will be about. So for you, Dr. Patricia Campos Medina, how do you plan to address the disparities in educational outcomes among different demographic groups, including racial and ethnic minorities, English language learners, and students with disabilities? Oh, you're muted.
It begins by fighting for resources to come back into our state through making sure that we receive we pay out a lot of money to the federal government, and we need to fight back to get more than 79 cents back so that we can fund our schools. Also, we need to demand that the federal government invest in the mandates that they have through the No Child Left Behind, and they actually work with the states to create a better funding formula for our school districts. For programs for mental health for our school districts, for after school and preschool services, we also need to figure out how to better fund those in collaboration with our state. Remember, our public schools are mainly funded through our property taxes, and that creates a disparity on the level of funding for each school district. So how do we fund the school formula in New Jersey is actually a matter of civil rights law and in trying to figure out how to desegregate our school system. I was a board member of the Latino Action Network, who filed a group that filed a desegregation lawsuit right now against the state of New Jersey for the way that they fund the school district that has basically segregated as public schools. There's school systems in which students of color do not see a white student, and there's white districts and white students do not interact with a Black or a Latino student, and that's creating high levels of disproportionate funding. So the federal government has a role to play in making sure that desegregation lawsuit is settled in a manner that invests in our communities, in a manner that it brings the same level of
30
resources
seconds.
system, so that we are able to meet the needs of our children, so that we can prepare them to graduate and to be able to get jobs and to be able to go to higher university. So I'm committed to working with both the labor union and labor advocates, invest in vocational schools, in special schools, in magnet schools, so that we are able to actually meet the students where they're at and help them achieve their highest potential.
Thank you. Thank you for that. For you, Mr. Ham, same question. How do you plan to address the disparities in educational outcomes among different demographic groups, including racial and ethnic minorities, English language learners, and students with disabilities?
What has to happen fundamentally is that the federal government must recommit itself to public education in the United States of America. That's at a whole nother level that we haven't discussed. That there's a move afoot in the United States to actually do away with public education, both at the elementary and secondary levels, and even at higher education levels. During the Trump administration, we had a Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, whose stated goal was to privatize public education in the United States. So first and foremost, the federal government must recommit itself to public education. And I will do that through legislation that I will introduce. Secondly, the federal government must increase funding for special needs students and socially disadvantaged students. Title I of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 provided a legal basis for the federal government to have special programs to help socially disadvantaged children, children that, were from poor families and low-income families. In fact, we had more of those programs in the 60s and the 70s than we do today. So as a U.S. Senator, I will put forward legislation to increase federal funding for public education, to increase specifically federal funding for special needs students, for socially disadvantaged students, from poor and working class families, so that we can close the disparities in public education in the United States.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And here's a quick follow-up for both you and Dr. Campos Medina. I'm going to direct it towards Dr. Campos Medina, if she's back. Just give me 1 second. Oh, yes. Okay, great. So, what if you two, you don't have, you could decline to answer, but what are your positions on charter schools? And this is for you first, Dr. Campos Medina. What is your position on charter schools?
Well, charter schools are part of the ecosystem of education, and they're, as long as they are complying with the curriculum and the demands of the public school system, I think that they have a role to play. They have to be they have to have oversight by a Department of Education, and they have to be meeting the same requirements of a public school system. Now, I am opposed to expansion of charter schools as the solution for improving our public school education. I'm committed to public school education, and I'm committed to figuring out the best investment formula so that all our children in public education are able to succeed. However, charter schools have become one of the avenues in which some of our children in the inner cities have been able to have the education needs that they need. Not every child learns the same way, so they're being able to experiment. So they have a role to play, just like magnet schools have a role to play, just like vocational schools have a role to play in our
1
education
minute.
system. So I don't I am I would like to see them being part of an ecosystem, but they should not be replacing our public school education system, and there should be oversight so that they're complying with all our civil rights protection in public education and our outcomes in public education for all our children.
Thank you. And for you, Mr. Ham, what is your stance on charter schools?
Regarding charter schools, I think it's important to say a word about the origins of charter schools. Charter schools, one of their origins is school integration. After the passage of the Brown decision, the anniversary of which was Friday, May 17th, schools began to integrate in the United States. But in response to that integration, white parents withdrew their children from public schools, and those that were of the Catholic faith put them in Catholic schools, and those that had the economic wherewithal put them in private schools. And then efforts were established to create other schools, which became charter schools. And people don't know that that's one of the origins of charter schools. So on this matter, I join with Dr. Campos Medina in opposing the further expansion of charter schools because they are, in fact, an avenue toward the privatization of public education in the United States. And believe me, this is a stated goal of a whole section of the population. They literally want to privatize and do away with public education, when in fact, we should be trying to strengthen public education. Right now, charter schools in some communities are consuming half, maybe even more than half, of public school budgets. And some of these charter schools are religious in nature, which I believe may be unconstitutional, a violation of the separation of church and state. So this is a very serious issue. Charter schools
30
are
seconds.
charter schools are a retreat from the idea that we should have a free, quality public education system for all students in the United States.
Thank you. Thank you. And both of you, I do want to say kudos. Charter schools, while they do have their place, and they do need to be highly regulated, but I do want to agree that they do eat up a lot of local funding, and it makes this towns look like they're caught in a situation that they're not handling money right, they're not doing things. But some people don't know that if you go to a charter school, the town's paying for busing. If you go to a charter school, and you need a service, the town is paying for it. So I definitely want to echo that and say that yes, charter schools, they have their place, but we do need to have so much more oversight, and we really need to humbly revision and rethink about the purpose of charters in today's day and age, and if they still are serving some of the purposes, of the positive purposes that we hoped they served in the past. So to bring us home with our final question, Mr. Ham, back to you. What measures do you propose to address the mental health crisis in our country and improve access to mental health services in underserved and hard to reach communities?
Again, this is another serious issue in the United States. One of the best things that we can do for the mental health crisis in the United States is to create a system of universal free medical care, which would include mental health care for all citizens, for all people in this country. One of the reasons that people don't avail themselves of mental health services is because they can be quite costly, especially if you don't have health insurance or if you're unemployed. And as was stated earlier, in this country, your health insurance is tied to your job. We should have a system of universal health care that covers all health needs, both physical and mental, so no one will have any hesitancy about availing themselves of those services. In the interim period, we must do,
1 minute.
as elected officials, all that we can to increase funding for mental health services and to make sure they are available to citizens throughout the United States.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. Dr. Patricia Campos Medina, last question. What measures do you propose to address the mental health crisis in our country and improve access to mental health services, particularly in underserved and hard to reach communities? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. First of all, I need to reinstate that what we need to do is to move to a system of Medicare for all, universal healthcare, in which we are making sure that we are providing the care for people in the manner that they need it. Mental health is a service that if you have a private insurance or you're well off, you have access to the best mental health providers that you can find. But if you're a working class person with an affordable healthcare, it's very difficult for you to get the proper healthcare. If you are a poor person and receiving Medicaid or even Medicaid is impossible. I had a situation of someone who worked for me for a while, whose teenager's daughter actually suffered severe depression. And while she was underage, she was able to keep her under her health insurance and then through Obamacare until she was 25 years old. But after 25 years old, this young person wasn't able to work because she was,
One minute.
Depression, actually went into Medicaid, and Medicaid was not able to help her out, and she actually got really, really sick. And to me, Medicaid, it is the last, it is a survival, not just for poor elder people, but for young people also who are struggling with mental health. So we need to do better for that. We also need to do better with our veterans. The Veteran Affairs Department needs to invest more in expanding mental health care services for our vets. We have a lot of young vets who came out of Afghanistan and Iraq who are suffering from severe PTSD, and they cannot get
30 seconds.
care with the mental health care providers because they get limited choices as to where to go for mental health. We need to do better through our VA services, and we need to do better through our Medicaid. So to actually address the concerns of those people who need those two programs.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you both so much. And since we have a few minutes left, not much, but a few, I just want to close this out with a question for the next generation. And this isn't wasn't on the list, but this question, from you hearing your responses, it just really resonated because you both speak about the present and the future. And some folks don't realize that you can be a part of the present and also help shape the future. So for our next generation, particularly our Gen Zs and our Gen Xs and whatever new acronym comes up next. I'm a millennial, so I don't count with those. But I want to ask you both, what would you say to the next generation and to the people who may tune into this and say, dang, something happened in my school, in my town. I want to make a change, but I don't know how. What would you say to that young boy or girl or them or they that, hey, this is how I did it. This is what you can do, and the world is yours. And I'm going to start with Miss Dr. Campos Medina. Can you please answer that? What are some words for the next generation who may be watching this and who want to create a change?
I am a Gen Xer, I went to school in the 90s where we when I got to college, I never had touched a computer, but by the time I left college, I had to have a computer to do everything. So I think we Gen Xers saw a big change in our lifetime. And we also saw a big change in the economy of this country. The United States divested from manufacturing jobs. It privatized student loans. It made higher education so expensive. We didn't the generation that during that time we were fighting still to protect affirmative action. I was part of the students who were fighting to keep affirmative action in the 90s, and just to see it go away right now in the 2020s, to me is a sign that each generation needs to fight for the rights and for their voice. How I got it done, every time there was an issue that I cared about, I got together with my fellow students. I joined a local organization. I was a student leader on campus, the student association. I was protesting if there was a rally on campus to organize a union by the janitors. I went there and then just took a flyer and then follow up on the phone call. What the, what I tell young people is to find your passion, fight for the world that you like to see, and look
On a
for other
minute.
people who have that same commitment to fighting for justice. Don't give up. Don't say nothing is gonna change. Don't get so caught up on your cell phone and on your feed that you don't actually engage in actually talking to people and bringing them together. I look at I look at my young boys. They're teenagers, and I sometimes I feel like we have failed them because the world is burning. We have storms that never end. We have early summers and hot winters, and climate change is a real challenge for the future generation. There's actual things that we adults need to be doing now to protect this planet for all of you, and you need to hold us accountable. You need to get engaged. You need to demand that we move away from fossil fuels, that we
30
invest
seconds.
in clean energy, that we create jobs for you, that we forgive student debt for you, and that we actually invest in your future and start worrying about the past. So I would say to not get discouraged. Find other people that care about you. Find your passion, and if you do your passion, you will be successful in everything that you engage. So there's a lot. We need you. We need you to get engaged, and we need you to create an organization and talk to people. Don't just talk through the phone. Technology is great, but you actually need to create relationships with other people that think like you, and that's how we create change in this country. And vote, register to vote and vote, because in the United States, voting is our power and is our voice. And if we let the billionaires and the rich people vote, they make policies for themselves. We need working people. We need urban kids to
That's
actually
time.
June 4th.
Thank you, Dr. Campos Medina. For you, Mr. Ham, what would you say for that next generation, for that little you, or for that little me, or for that little Tamira Rhea? What would you say for us if we were watching this video like, man, I want to change the world, I don't know how?
Well, the first thing I would say is look at the students who are organizing and mobilizing for an end to the genocidal war in Gaza. Young people are inspired by young people. and the students on college campuses who are engaged in protests trying to get their universities to divest from companies that are doing business with Israel, particularly assisting Israel in carrying out the genocidal war in Gaza. They are on college campuses all across this country. In fact, I heard a figure a few days ago that over 3,000 students have been arrested so far in demonstrations pertaining uh, to the genocidal war in Gaza. And that war is only 7 months long. We're not even like in the fifth year, like in the Vietnam War. It took 5 or 6 years before the anti-war protests in Vietnam took off. Frantz Fanon, who wrote the book The Wretched of the Earth, said that each generation must realize its historical mission, fulfill it or betray it. And this is the role of young people. You have to find the cause of your generation and get involved with an organization that you feel comfortable with and fight for justice. You know, it could be one of the established legacy type civil rights organizations, or it could be an organization that recently came into being, or it could be an organization that you form. You could form your own organization and get started in the fight. The other thing you need to do is struggle. Is struggle, join an organization so you can struggle, but study. It's very important to study. Like young people today, by the time they graduate high school, should have read all 6 books that Dr. Martin Luther King wrote. I mean, if we got a King holiday and schools named after King and streets, you should at least know what Dr. King was fighting for. He wrote 6 books: Measure of a Man, Stride Toward Freedom, Strength to Love, Why We Can't Wait, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos and Community, and Trumpet of Conscience. I would start with Where We Go From Here,
1 minute.
Chaos or Community, to find the inspiration that you need and the ideological grounding that you need to be in this struggle for social justice. So my answer in short is to struggle and to study.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, our team knows that. You know, I'm finishing on my PhD. Ria is a recent graduate, and Tamira both recent graduates. So, they love to study, but we hate to struggle. But we know there's beauty in the struggle. So this was great. This was so delightful. Before we exit and before we end this off, I would like to open the floor for each of you, Mr. Ham and Dr. Campos Medina, so you could just say a few last words to the viewers and a few last words to just everybody. So we're going to give you each 2 minutes. So Mr. Ham, you can start, and then Tamir is going to time you.
I thought that was the end. I've run out of things to
Oh,
say.
so
No,
hey,
I'm joking. Let me say something. Um, I hope that you have listened to what both of us, Dr. Campos Medina, and myself have said. I hope you will weigh what they said. And of course, I hope that you will consider voting for me as your United States Senator from New Jersey on June 4th in the New Jersey Democratic primary. If you want to find out more about my campaign, go to www.lawrenceham4senate.info, Lawrence Ham, the number 4, senate.info, and you can find out more about my platform. You can sign up to be a campaign volunteer.
Oh, you're muted.
Am I unmuted now?
yes,
Yes,
sorry,
sir.
Okay. Did you hear what I said before?
yes.
Oh, okay. And go to my webpage, lawrenceham4senate.info, and sign up to be a campaign volunteer. Make a donation to the campaign. And the last thing I'd like to say is the election is not over on June 4th. November is the general election. And I urge everyone, don't sit it out. And with regard to June 4th, for president, I'm voting uncommitted. I think we have to send a strong message to President Biden that we want this genocidal war, that we want this genocidal war in Gaza to end. So when you vote, you'll have the choice of President Biden. There's another person running for president. And then thirdly, uncommitted. I would urge people who are opposed to the war in Gaza to vote uncommitted and send a strong message to President Biden. And then in November, we should all unite and do everything possible to make sure that Donald Trump is not reelected president of the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ham. And for you, Dr. Campos Medina, your final words?
Yes, I want to thank all of you for hosting this important debate on critical issues for our urban voters, for our Black and Brown communities, for poor working people. I think it's important to listen to our views and what we bring to the table. I also think it's important for all of you to know who's not in this room, who is not a candidate for the United States Senate, who's not here, and who already assumes that he is the winner of the election, and therefore he doesn't have to interact and answer questions on critical issues. Please note that, because our record, my record of fighting for working class people and for urban people is long. It's 30 years long, and I will continue to do that as I move forward. Like I said at the beginning, I am running for the United States because in this moment in time where women are losing a reproductive right, where we are lacking access to reproductive healthcare justice, we need a woman to go to Washington, D.C. and fight for the right of our Black and Brown girls, our Black and Brown working class women, to have right access to healthcare so that we can prevent maternal health, the high levels of maternal healthcare problems that we have in our Black and Brown Latino communities. We also need to, I also said that we need to make sure that we are protecting our right to have children, not to have children, children that grow up in good and healthy communities. And that is the job that as a woman, the only woman on this race, I will go to Washington, D.C. to do. I am an immigrant. I am a proud Jersey girl. And my policy positions are based on the work that I've done for a long time. I said I went to college with student loans, so I will always fight for student debt forgiveness. I grew up without access to healthcare as the daughter of a janitor and a housekeeper, so therefore I will always fight for Medicare for all. And I grew up during war. I'm a child of war, so I will always fight for a foreign policy that invests in peace. I am running as a woman, as the only woman on this race, because I want to make sure that at a time that New Jersey is lacking on women representation, remember, only 30% of elected officials in New Jersey are women. And for Black women, it's even lower. And for Latina women, even lower.
30 seconds.
A woman needs to go to the United States Senate. And I am running so that every young girl, daughter of a teacher, daughter of a nurse, daughter of a housekeeper, knows that we are ready to represent all of New Jersey and fight for our communities. So please remember to vote for me June 4th. Go to my website, patriciaforsenate.com, patriciaforsenate.com. Sign up and volunteer and help make history in electing the first woman to the United States Senate, and a woman who will fight for every working class kid in New Jersey so they can also build their American dream. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ria. Thank you, Tamir. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We're going to turn everything off and end the stream. Thank you for the audience. Thank you for whoever are streaming in. Larry and Dr. Campos Medina, can you just hang on 1 second? We're going to get everybody out. Thank you, everybody. Whoever signed up, we're going to send you the recording. We're going to send you any information and every information that was stated here by both candidates. So thank you.